Hello. That was me doing a theatrical fake turn away from the desk. It's so refreshing to be openly honest about such things, everything. I'm going to start by saying I hope you're well. And I do hope you're well, even though that is, again, a slightly vacuous thing to say because you and I have probably never met. I'd like to meet you under the right circumstances, which would be over a cup of tea somewhere. But it may never happen, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But it also doesn't mean that I can't begin by saying that I hope you're well, because I do hope you are well. And welcome to another wonderful hour. Today it's the middle of the hottest summer that the United Kingdom has ever experienced. And lots of people are worried and complaining and talking about, are we into our third official heat wave? And is there now officially a drought, whatever that means? I mean, there's not a lot of standing water. I suppose if you're a farmer and you need to water your crops, then it is a crisis. But for the rest of us, it's the kind of weather that we used to pay hundreds, maybe even thousands of pounds to enjoy by having to go to North Africa or the Mediterranean or somewhere. But now it's come right up to our front door and we should be enjoying it with factor 50 and the right sort of headgear and maybe even a parasol. I'll get onto the use of umbrellas in this weather a little bit later on, because I had a wonderful journey this week. And the sun was hot and I had a 20-minute walk in it, which is just about enough for me. Some people are made of sterner stuff, but you still can't be too careful. Anyway, we'll get onto that in just a moment. What's wonderful today? We've got people who are, if you are alert to it, can always be wonderful. We've got journeys, which I mentioned a moment ago, pop culture, the natural world. Let's get stuck in, shall we? So, today, what's wonderful? We needed to get a couple of sturdy geezers in to take about 30 feet off a huge and burgeoning bay tree towards the bottom of our garden, largely because our next door neighbours, whose back garden backs onto our back garden, said that they were losing a lot of light, both in the garden and in the house. And they said, we'd love it if you could trim it down a little bit. We'll go halves with you. Just as well they did, because the two blokes who came round gave us a good quote, gave it a lot of thought, did a lot of chin scratching, and came up with 650 quid. And there would be two men, and they'd have to hire this machine, which is sort of like a chipper. You must have heard them if you haven't seen them, because they're very loud. And they turn wood and branches and leaves and things into sawdust. And I hope they're able to do something useful with the sawdust, even if it's only supply people who keep rabbits. But hiring that machine cost them some money. So it was a good quote. So we said, go ahead and do it. And they came on what turned out to be the hottest day ever in the United... No, not quite. It was 40 centigrade somewhere in Lincoln, I think about 3 or 4 years ago. But it was way up into the high 30s, 38 point something, I think. And there were these two guys, and they were going to work through this heat. They both stripped down to their waist and got on with it. I put a large jug of water, which was cold to begin with, but not for very long, and two nice sparkling glasses on the patio table, because they were going backwards and forwards up and down the garden, cutting and then dragging leaves through to the front where they parked the grinder thing. And they were glugging away, and they were so industrious. But also my wife and one of our guests pointed out that they were fit. This is the word nowadays, apparently. They were fit. They were Italian. And so they had a certain buckle to their swash, you know. They were sturdy but debonair somehow. They carried themselves well. They walked well. They climbed well. They were polite. They had good smiles. And then one of the ladies present, looking out through the French windows, admiring their work and them, said, I do believe that the head bloke, because one was doing some of the lugging and the other one was doing the cutting, and we figured that the cutting guy who was up the tree was the head bloke. She said, I swear, listen to this. She said, I swear he's had his nipples pierced. Well, we said this to our young guest, who also has a few piercings. And my other half said, oh, you won't like the look of this. He's got his nipples pierced. And she went, oh, no. No, I'd like that. So you've got these people at the French windows trying to catch a glimpse of this Italian up a tree in our garden. Absolutely sweltering, trying to catch a glimpse of his piercings. Oh, it was just one of those moments where you couldn't better it in so many ways. It was trivial, it was shallow, it was human, it was glorious. And then they finished up. I asked them to finish as quickly as possible and get out the heat. And they said, yes, we can get this done by 2:00. And they did. And I took the guy the money, 325 from us and 325 from our neighbours, in cash. And he just folded the envelope in half and put it in his back pocket. And I said, you're not going to count it? He said, no, it'll be fine, which was good. In his Italian accent, no, it'll be fine, like that. And then I said to him, hot day this for you? He said, yes. He said, I had forgotten what this sort of heat can be like. He said, because growing up in Italy, of course, it often gets very hot, but I had forgotten because I have lived here now many years. He was a lovely lad. They were very neat and tidy. Their machinery was in perfect, it was sparkling. And it was a real pleasure to have them on our premises doing this important and valuable and much appreciated job, but also bringing a little something, and I hesitate to use the word naughty, but it was something naughty but nice about the entire experience. People, if you've got your senses on standby, people can be just absolutely wonderful. So speaking of the sun, what else is wonderful is this. I had to walk to a cafeteria with a young guest that we've got staying with us and her baby. And the walk took about 20 minutes and it was tiring, but it was hot, obviously. And we had factor 15 and I had this straw hat, which I'm not keen on wearing because it makes me look like all other men in our high street with their straw hats. But anyway, I wore it out of for medicinal reasons. But I also took our brolly, our ordinary black. We've got a collapsing brolly. It's about that long, and you press a button in the handle, and it. And I took that. We walked along. We strolled along the pavement. The roads were very quiet. People seem to stay in when it's very, very hot. And we got where we were going, and they served some lovely, fresh, healthy drinks at this particular cafeteria. So you can have tea or coffee if you want, and you can have a sticky bun. The young lady who's staying with us, she had a sticky bun. I had some elderflower. I wasn't that keen on it, but it was cold and it was wet. And we sat in this chapel. It's a converted chapel. It's now a cafeteria come recreational area. And it was very quiet because people were staying in, basically, because of the heat. So it was very quiet. And then a lady came and started talking to us because she wanted to do the whole goo goo gaga thing with the 6-month-old baby. And she did it very well, I have to say. She was absolutely charming. And it turned out that she was there to put on a puppet show. And I showed great interest in this because she had the booth. In the United Kingdom, we have a thing called Punch and Judy, and her booth was identical to a Punch and Booty booth, except I think her name was Winnie or something, not Mr. Punch. And she showed me all her puppets, which were laid out on a bench that she was going to be letting the children play with, and also showing them how to use them and letting them have some interactive fun, which was a really good thing. And one of the puppets was a legendary British television puppet who went by the name, I don't think they do it anymore, he went by the name of Sooty. And it was a proper puppet because instead of being short and the glove coming down to about there, the glove came almost down to her elbow. The puppet came almost down to her elbow. This was a professional Sooty. So to keep the conversation lubricated, I was able to say to her, "Oh, I once met the puppeteer who did Sooty, Harry Corbett." And she said, "So did I. I was on the same bill as him at Salisbury Theatre. What a lovely man." So off we went, and she was telling me mainly, stories about her days in the theatre and what have you. So I said, "What are you, a puppeteer?" "No," she said. "No, I'm a magician. There was a time when I was Britain's only female magician. It was very rare then for females on stage to do anything other than sing and dance. And I would do tricks, magic tricks. And I'd also do a little bit of puppetry as well. So I was a bit of an all-rounder." So we had a wonderful time, me, our guest, her baby, and this lady. And then it was time to go back. And the same thing. Slogging our way for 20 minutes, going from tree shade to tree shade. We had a pushchair, and we would scurry in the sunshine and then get into the shade of a big tree and walk very slowly in order to sort of cool down. But the main thing was we had this umbrella, and however ridiculous we looked, sheltering underneath, and I was using it mainly to keep the sun off the baby, sheltering under this black sort of city gent type umbrella in the sweltering sunshine, again, was faintly ridiculous, but the entire experience absolutely wonderful. And it made room for this. On the way back, we pulled into the corner store round the corner from where I live, and I bought 2 orange flavoured ice lollies. And when we got in and switched the little air conditioning unit that we've got in the kitchen on, and the room started to become temperate again, and we just sat in silence and savoured our lollies, it was a wonderful couple of hours, absolutely wonderful, but made even more wonderful by just being alert to all the little things that were dripping into our soul and furnishing it, nourishing it, as the afternoon went by. Absolutely wonderful. I'll tell you what was kind of wonderful. Our guest said to us one morning this week, "Did you hear that racket in the night?" And I said, "I didn't. None of us did except you. What was it?" She said, "I don't know. It was exactly midnight." I said, "Oh, I know what that was then. You don't have to tell me any more. That was our midnight fox. We have a fox that comes through our garden on the stroke of midnight every night. And if our dog is alert to this fact, it sets her off barking. And she only barks for about 30 seconds, not even 30 seconds. But we let it happen because she feels as though she's protecting our place, and she doesn't want any of these foxes coming in and sometimes occasionally doing a little bit of business in the garden, which is not a very pleasant sight. But anyway, she said, "Well, I haven't heard the fox before." I said, "No, it's a silent fox, unless, wait a minute, what time of the year is it?" "Oh." I said, "You know what was going on?" She said, "No, that's what I want to know. I was a bit scared at first." I said, "Yes, it is a scary sound. It's the noise they make when they're mating." It's their ecstasy. It's the sound of a fox's ecstasy when they're mating. Don't ask me why it sounds so troubled and angry and terrified, as well as terrifying. It's a scream. And you can hear that it's 1.5 foxes screaming. There's a big screamer and a little sort of squeakier scream goes on. Anyway, the guest was fascinated by this because the guest comes from a a central city, a built-up central city, where you do get foxes, but they don't sort of come up to your kitchen door like the foxes do in the more rural area where we live. And the other thing that she had never heard before, she came down one morning for breakfast and said, "What's the animal that at night goes, woohoo?" Woohoo. I said, "What, like that?" She said, "Yeah, woohoo." I said, "Well, have you not heard one of them before? It's an owl." "Oh," she said, "are there really owls?" I said, "Yes, there are. There's one that lives round here and that comes out at night hunting and just being an owl, really. They are properly nocturnal." Oh, and she was fascinated by all of this. She almost started to act as though she was living in a great safari park in Kenya or something because of all the exotic wildlife. And it made us feel proud of where we live. It made us feel proud that we were closer to our roots than people who live in built-up areas, largely, not always, but largely. And it was an enjoyable experience. It was an enjoyable breakfast. So now we're toying with teasing her and saying something like, "Have you seen the local Himalayan bear lately?" Or, "Oh, I believe they're releasing another elephant into the wild up at the meadow tomorrow." We won't, of course, because there's an element of there's an element of edge about that I wouldn't like to impart to the situation. But at the moment, her infatuation with our wildlife is absolutely wonderful. What I call pop culture can be wonderful. I remember working for a company that owned a radio station that gave me work, and I mentioned one day on air that I'd been enjoying The Simpsons, and the managing director come head honcho of this radio station happened to hear me say it, and as I was leaving the building, he made what I considered to be a slightly patronizing remark about pop culture and how it's important to keep up with it, as though I was watching The Simpsons out of some sort of professional duty. I wasn't. I was watching The Simpsons because it's absolutely wonderful. But if you are alert to the joys of pop culture, then it enriches your life enormously. It deepens your soul. It lifts your spirits, and at the same time, it just can bring a greater depth to your perceptions and understanding of things. And I enjoy the fact that YouTube now knows some of the things that I like to watch again and again. And one of those things, it turns out, and I didn't plan this, it just turns out that I watch 5 minutes of here and then a different 5 minutes of it there, is a film called 12 Angry Men. And all it is a jury arguing over whether or not a young lad murdered his father. And they've got to decide. And if they decide guilty, he will go to the electric chair. It's a very powerful courtroom drama. Courtroom dramas are usually pretty damn good, but they usually have more going on. You know, To Kill a Mockingbird is a great courtroom drama, but there's so much else going on. But there's nothing else going on in 12 Angry Men except 12 men are arguing. I don't think you hardly see anybody else except the man who brings the usher or whatever, who brings them into the jury room, the knife, because they want to examine the alleged murder weapon again. But the performance, the quality of the performance, and the way the film is it's black and white, the way the film is directed so that you get very, very close-ups. And then you get big wide shots of all 12 of them, and then another real close-up. And you get to know each of the 12 men, which you want to do because we're all curious, aren't we? We're all nosy. And you get to realize that just as in life, there are some of the men on the jury that you really, really like, such as the first man to say, "I think he's not guilty," is played by Henry Fonda. And we don't know anything about him until the very end of the movie, where it's revealed, I think, that he's an architect. Then there's a very elderly man, or at least he portrays a very elderly man, who also has the courage and the defiance to say, after a few moments of listening to Henry Fonda, "I'm going to change my verdict. I'm going to say not guilty too." And this incenses some of the 12 angry men because they want to convict. And then it turns out right at the end of the film that there is a hidden reason why one man in particular wants to convict the boy. And it's because he and his son are at loggerheads or worse. They obviously don't get on. And he is saddened enormously, angered enormously by it, this man. And he wants to take vengeance on a completely strange, unknown to him young boy, almost in retribution to his own son. So it's a film with magnificent depth. And what I find is that if I watch 5 minutes of it, the whole film just replays itself in my senses, not in my, I don't go through, it's an 80-minute film. I don't go through it bit by bit. But YouTube will offer me the bit where the bloke bemoans the fact that he's going to miss the baseball because the jury are going on. He's that sort of, he's a very shallow man. And there are other people there who are equally shallow. There's an advertising executive who's very proud of some of the slogans that he's come up with. And he actually uses executive speak on occasions, talking about, let's run this one up the flagpole and see if anyone salutes or something like that. So it's a great movie, but I get to enjoy the whole experience within the 5 minutes of the clip, a different clip every time that YouTube offer me, and I can scarcely resist it. Absolutely wonderful pop culture. Wonderful. Food and drink is so important, and it can be so absolutely wonderful. And during the week, it was my turn to cook. And because I had it requested, I cooked a particular dish that I'd cooked a few times before, and it had gone down really well. But on this occasion, I wasn't paying attention. I had the oven on too hot, and I left it in too long. And it wasn't just baked solid, it was black. It was black. And I put it on the kitchen table, in case anybody wanted to risk it. And it was the second worst meal I've ever cooked. And they took the mickey gently and with a lot of affection, soppy old him. And I took the mickey out of myself as well. And said, I think we might have this again tomorrow night. Do you fancy? The point is this, a little bit of self-deprecation, it's called, isn't it? Can go a long, long way. And they didn't want to say this is awful, but they waited until I said it. When I said it, they tentatively agreed with me. And then they started agreeing with me with some enthusiasm. And then the conversation turned to, how could you ruin such a simple meal as this? It was an oven bake, but I left it in too long. I wasn't paying attention. And I was the source of much mirth, a great deal of ridicule, all of it kind of well meant. And then at the end of it, we resolved, we got on the phone and we ordered a takeaway. And this food was so poor, I couldn't even give it to the dog. It was terrible. And I think we had to throw away the baking tray because you couldn't get it off. You couldn't get the ingredients which had charred. Yeah, I mean, you could have done a charcoal drawing with some of the bits. But there was something that brought us together about this wonderfully appalling meal that I'd prepared. And it's 48 hours later, it is still the subject of conversation and laughter. So anything can be wonderful if you pay attention. That's all we've got time for on this edition of the Wonderful Hour, which isn't an hour. It's about as long as it needs to be. I didn't get round to talking about that. I remember the first time I remember seeing the sea, arriving by coach from the city and knowing that the sea was round the corner because my mum said that we're nearly at the sea because the light changes when you get nearly to the sea. And I was about 5. And this was one of the hugest things that's ever happened to me. We'll do it another day. In the meantime, I wish you a good week. I wish you plenty of wonderfuls, and we will talk soon. Bye.